In this demonstration, we'll take a look at how to view and compare configuration files. So the first thing that I want to do is take a look at my list of files that I do currently have. So I'm going to use the file list command to list my files. And you'll notice here that I have two configuration files that I have saved. I have a base config and an interfaces config. Now I can display the contents of those configuration files, either one of them, by using the file show command and then specifying the file name that I want to show. So file space show space base config will show the contents of the base config file. And then at this point I can go through and I can look at the configuration that's been saved into this file. So I can use my spacebar to scroll through. Now, a lot of times what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to compare maybe the contents of two configuration files against each other and just highlight the differences. So instead of you going through and reading through the file and trying to figure out what's different about these files, it definitely would be much easier to have a command that can do that. And we do have a file compare command that we can use to compare configuration files. So let's take a look at that. First thing I want to do is make a change to my system, save that out to a different configuration file, and then what we'll do is we'll compare the base config with this new configuration file. So I'm going to start with the edit command to go into configuration mode, and I'm going to set system host name. I'm just going to alter the host name of my system. So I'm going to alter the host name to Boston dash, I'll put R2 here, and then hit enter. Now that I've altered the host name of the device, so now it's set to BOS R2, you'll notice that I don't see the configuration because it is part of my potential configuration or candidate configuration. So it is there. I can use the show command to display my candidate configuration if I wanted to. So I can use show just to kind of prove that it has taken the BOS R2. So you can see here BOS R2 is in my current configuration, or what we call the candidate configuration, even though it hasn't been applied, to my system yet. So I can see it's still set to the old BOS R1. That's because I haven't committed the change. So now what I want to do is I want to save the configuration out to a file. So I'm going to save this out to a file called test config. Now, I purposely haven't committed the changes because I want to show you that when you use the save command, not only does it save your configuration, but it also saves the candidate configuration. So it will save the setting of BOS-R2 instead of the BOS-R1 as the host name. So I am going to commit this change. So I'll just do a commit. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to operational mode and take a look at those two files. So now I'll go to exit and do a file list command. We can see we have our base config, but we also have test config. If I want to display the contents of test config, I can do the file space show and then specify the file name. So here you can see that we do have the BOS R2 as the host name. And just for the sport of it, what we're going to do is we're going to do a file show of base config. And I want you to notice that it has a configuration of host name as BOS R1. So that's really what I'm looking for as the difference between these two files when I go and compare the two files. So to compare the two files, we're going to use the file command. And if I use question mark, you'll get a list of parameters. And you'll notice that compare is one of the parameters. So I do a compare, and then I'm going to do a question mark to see what my next option is. And here you can see that there's a couple different parameters, but if you want to give a list of files to compare, then you got to plug in the files keyword. So I want to compare files, and then I'm going to do a question mark again. So see how I'm using the help to kind of build up the command. And here they're showing you a list of files that you could specify as your source file, right? So this is where I'm going to use base config, and then I'll put a question mark. And here it wants to know what you want to compare it to. And notice that, again, they're giving us file names in the list. So I'm going to use test config. So the command is file space compare space files the source file and the destination file. So I do want to compare those two files. Now when I hit enter, I said there's only one change, but actually there's another change, and that is at the very top of your configuration, it specifies the last time the configuration was changed. So that date and time has been altered as well. But down bottom here, you can see line 4 is changed. So we've got hostname bossr1 was removed from the configuration, while added into the configuration was our hostname bossr2. So, or the left side file base config has hostname bossr1, whereas the right hand side file has hostname bossr2, and the right hand file is test config. So left side, right side, it's pointing to the left and it's pointing to the right. So letting you know kind of which file has those settings on those lines, right? So again, we've got line 1 here for both the left side, right side, and line 4 for both left side, right side. So very useful command to be able to compare files against each other. So in this demonstration, we saw how to view and compare configuration files.